Good morning and welcome to Microsoft. So this morning we welcome you to a session about compliance. We have a very nice agenda board built for you. So we hope you find it interesting. And so we have 3 items to cover with you in this webinar. So we start off what is all the challenges that you can have on changing to the cloud, and specifically also what does it mean for a Dutch landscape. Next to that, we are going to look into the capabilities of compliance that Microsoft can offer, and also what kind of conversation can you have with your customer? What audiences, what questions can you expect? So we want to help you with that. And next to that, when you're interested, you can actually build your practice and solutions. So we'll give you some ideas about how you can bring that forward. So I want to introduce you to Martin Vliem. Martin Vliem is our NSO, our National Security Officer, and a lot of experiences around topics around compliance, privacy, and trust. So welcome, Martin.
Thank you, Mike.
And well, let's kick things off. We are living in strange times at the moment, and a lot of companies are actually seeing a challenge on their business model. So they are going to actually drive more digital innovation, and they have to adapt to a new era. So when you look in this era, compliance is probably a big item. So how does that play in digital transformation?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, well, indeed, so we see a lot of organizations, of course, in the midst or during their digital transformation, adopting more technologies to support their business processes. And of course, when you start to adopt more technology and also cloud technologies as part of that, then typically that also means that you're going to process more types of data, different types of data, sensitive types of data, intellectual property, and what have you. So you also see companies more and more taking use of those cloud services and processing very important and sensitive sets of data. Now, obviously, that also means that there are some concerns on security, privacy, and compliance in general. So the whole compliance thing is also something that also grows in concert with organizations moving their digital estate further along. And if you have a look at the complete compliance state of many organizations, then you see many changes there. And that's also what's challenging. So there are constant new regulations, new laws, new standards, new frameworks that organizations need or have to comply to or want to comply to. And all those statements and regulations are also frequently changing. So keeping updated on what that means is important as well. And of course, compliance in itself is important because non-compliance can lead to reputational damage, can lead to loss of market share, can lead to even personal or direct liabilities. So compliance, yes, is a very important part that goes along into organizations that step into the digitalization area. And of course, it's not specific to digitalization, it was there before as well. But we do see a lot of questions coming from organizations stepping into the cloud, using technologies, what that means from their compliance perspective.
So Martin, when I look and I have conversations with customers, the term GRC is many times coming up. So what challenges does that bring?
Yeah, well, GRC, governance, risk and compliance, often 3 terms that closely interact with each other. Let me first step a little bit back and talk a little bit about compliance in itself. So compliance in general, there are several definitions for what it can be. As shown on the slide, you have a pure dictionary definition, which has a lot to do with the act of process of complying to, well, it says desire, demand, or proposal, or conformity. Most of the time, we talk about compliance in concert with regulations, standards, and frameworks. But of course, it's also very important if you are in the compliance area or your customers or your clients are in the compliance area to first and foremost understand what's actually required of those organizations. And that's also why the slide says, well, a realistic definition may be ask your auditors what is important from a compliance perspective to them. Now, compliance in itself has some advantages, some disadvantages. I already mentioned some of the challenges, a lot to do with the complexity, business processes complexity, interpretations, and also a lot of consequences of non-compliance. But there certainly are also a few advantages of compliance in itself. It helps you set some sort of a minimum bar for security, privacy, and other compliance areas. You also see that a lot of organizations are working together on new standards, and those standards even may help you to innovate. So there are also certain advantages in there. And of course, it may help you organize and optimize your own processes, your internal processes. And yeah, to make it very specific what compliance is all about, basically it has to do with first, okay, define what you have to do, to what do you need to comply, do you want to comply? Then the second step is, okay, start doing what you want to do. And then one of the important steps of compliance is, of course, the third step is provide evidence or proof, if you will, or assurance that you have been correctly doing that what you needed or wanted to do. So those three steps are essential in each and every compliance project. And then on governance, risk, and compliance, that you firstly addressing your question, we often see this come together. Governance is the more the strategic alignment, the strategy. Risk sets the boundaries. Out of risk, operational risk, financial risk, security risk. It sets more or less the boundaries and the decision parameters for the organization in governance to set, okay, what's the boundary where we can, and what are the decisions that we have to make.
So risk is then really an item that you have to put front and center in your conversations with customers.
Yeah, you have to integrate it into your whole, into your approach. And compliance often is more the allow and deny part, which sets specific rules and frameworks and standards, but it also interacts with risk. For example, in compliance risk, there's also risk of incompliance. But it's also important to understand that if you are compliant, if you want to comply to a certain security standard, then if you comply, that does not necessarily mean that all security risks have already been addressed. So compliance often is also a minimum bar, and it may well be that you have to do more. So it interacts with the governance, risk, and compliance. Normally we see them interacting with each other and also adopted in the same way.
So what you actually see is a lot of big corporations, they have big departments. So when I'm a smaller company, do we have to care about compliance?
Well, compliance has a lot to do with regulations, framework, standards. Where it pertains to laws and regulation, of course, you have to comply, small or large. And that, of course, can be a challenge. And there are some best practices that can help. Of course, you can work together with your peers in the market and maybe learn from others. That's always a good thing to start off. But what we also see is that, especially in the security and privacy area, and there are a lot of questions on security, etc., and security risk, you see that there are a lot of regulations that more or less ask the same things of an organization to do. And we typically talk about the things that you need to do as controls. So what are the countermeasures, the measures you have in place to make sure you can comply to, for example, security standards, security regulation, privacy regulation. And what you can do, of course, as a smaller organization, but also large organizations do the same, is to say, okay, let's think of or adopt some sort of a standard framework that matches to many sorts of regulations. And we more or less within Microsoft do the same. So we have our own internal control framework, and that single control framework matches to a lot of frameworks and regulations across the world. And I listed on this slide a few examples of control frameworks where you could have that you could take as an example. NIST, ISO has a lot of ISO 27002 is a well-known framework. COBIT, maybe the CIS 18, it was the CIS 20. So there are several examples here, and even those examples are listed here overlap for a large part. So also as a smaller organization, take a framework, try to make sure that you do the governance around the framework to make sure that you comply to that framework, and that framework will help you then to comply to the specific regulations and laws that you have to comply to. But of course, we're talking with partners here as well. This is typically where a lot of clients need help. So I think it's a great opportunity to also step into and to help clients, small and larger, into setting this up.
So when we have a look that a lot of companies are having a plethora of devices and services in their organization. So when moving to the cloud, I outsource everything to the cloud company, or isn't it?
Well, you could hope for such a thing, but obviously, if you are moving into the cloud, starting to adopt cloud services, then of course, part of the things you need to do so part of your full compliance estate, if you will, is more or less transferred, well, at least the implementation of controls and the management of controls and measures is transferred to the cloud service provider. But not everything. And I think we have been talking about the shared responsibility model for a while now, which is most of the time focused on security. And then you see typically, well, if you move to the cloud, there are a lot of things for physical protection and networking controls and what have you in the lower end of the stack that are maintained and operated and controlled by the cloud provider. But there are always responsibilities that the user or a customer or client needs to implement themselves. And you see an example on this slide that typically takes security as an example. There are many domains, again, privacy, quality, availability, many domains where you can talk about resilience and compliance. And you see here typically the shared responsibilities there. So yes, cloud can help. And understand that most cloud providers also provide a lot of assurance already against a lot of frameworks that you can reuse for your own compliance. So, and that's what we see a lot of organizations do. So they step into the cloud. Of course, they have to assess the compliance of the cloud provider itself, and therefore the cloud provider provides a lot of assurance. But they can also reuse that assurance from the cloud provider for their own compliance challenges and their own compliance needs. So you need to augment or add to what the cloud provider is already doing.
Okay, so it's not leaning back. You have to be actively yourself.
Yeah, and this is of course also because we see so many questions and challenges on that area, why several of our solutions that are built into our platform that we're going to address later as well in part 2 and 3, we have some compliance solutions that both help customers and clients to figure out, okay, what's Microsoft compliance, but also can help customers with their own compliance on top of the platform. And we're going to talk about that later.
So there's guidance available on that.
Yep.
So in the introduction, we said, okay, we have a framework which is international, but we have to deal with local regulations.
Yep.
So what are the most important ones, and what do we offer customers and partners to that?
Yeah, so I thought, okay, let me provide a brief overview of what the discussions typically are within the Netherlands, within Dutch customers, what the challenges are, both for organizations stepping into the cloud. But of course, the laws and regulations I'm going to briefly address here do not apply specific to cloud computing. They apply to customers and Microsoft as well in general. Yep. So as a little bit of context, so we saw a lot of organizations, especially in regulated industries, so government, healthcare, financial services. There was a value perception of what cloud could bring them. Now they started many years ago always on premises in their own data centers, etc. And many years ago, we already started discussions, okay, is there room, is there value in adopting on top of or next to what you already have, your own data centers, is there value into cloud computing? Now, we're now many years later, and we do see a lot of uptake of cloud computing, which is great. But of course, there was also always the challenge, okay, is that possible? And especially within the government, early discussions basically said, well, it's a binary no. Yep. It's a red cross, no. But what we tried to do, and the market tried to do, cloud service providers, was basically from stepping out of that yes-no discussion into what would be the requirements. Can we talk about and understand what the requirements are? And requirements have a lot to do with compliance, security, privacy, and a lot to do with standards, regulations, etc. So let's then take a step back and see what's actually required from a legal or from a standards perspective, and then see if cloud providers can step up to those regulations and standards. And this is actually the same as what clients are also doing in their own compliance challenges. They have some external or internal standards, regulations that they need to comply to, and they more or less have to figure out, okay, so what are the controls and countermeasures that we have to put in place to make sure that we comply to this. So to give you a little bit of overview, this shows some of the developments, the policy developments within the Dutch government. So this is about the adoption and compliance challenges of adoption of technology in Dutch government. You typically see that privacy is first and foremost always number one. So the GDPR is always number one where it comes to a legal framework. But there are some specific regulations, the VEER, it's Dutch security law specifically pertaining to the Dutch government. And there are some standards, some frameworks. Most important or most well known is the BO, Baseline Informatiebeveiliging Overheid. It's ISO 27001-2 lookalike. So that helps because Microsoft certifies against ISO 27001 and 2, so that matches pretty well. But those are typically the main frameworks, and we see a positive policy development within the Dutch government that's more open to the adoption of cloud as well. So that goes hand in hand. So this is an example of government. Then financial services took more or less the same process. We saw over the last 10 years the same policy development. First started at a no. The regulator really said, no, you can't, to financial institutions. No, public clouds, there's no possibility for that. But over time, that grew to, well, actually a very positive and constructive perception towards cloud computing. And now we see cloud computing in financial services is very common. But also there, if you look at the legal frameworks, they're very open and receptive, and there are a lot of possibilities and there's a lot of room to start adopting there as well. And the cloud, indeed, also in financial services, can help you to comply with those financial regulations and the standards.
So in one point, the binary has been easing up.
Yeah.
And also where it was maybe initially seen as a burden, it can be transitioned to a benefit as well now.
Yeah, especially in financial services, we see some large banks who basically said, well, a lot of the compliance work we had to do before we stepped into cloud is now partly because shared responsibilities, but is now partly handled by the cloud service provider, and it really helps. Of course, you still need to validate that the cloud provider does what they need to do, and you can do that through assurance. And I have a slide on that the next slide is on that. So you have to evaluate and validate that, but it surely helps. One other entity where we also see a lot of developments, and we will share the slides so you can read the smaller letters later on, but also in Dutch healthcare you see a positive development on what can and cannot be done within the cloud. And also there we do see a lot of room to start adopting cloud computing, but also to help compliance challenges in there. And again, you see some of the legal frameworks here. Again, GDPR, WGBO, Wet op de geneeskundige behandeling overeenkomsten, all have implications into the use of technology, compliance implications. And also some well-known security frameworks. NEN 7510 is a very well-known framework. Again, ISO 27001-2 lookalike, so also matches pretty well to, for example, what Microsoft already performs there.
So when I look to healthcare, that's specifically the area where there is sensitive information.
Yep.
I also see that Microsoft is more and more talking and getting more focus on privacy as a topic.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, privacy remains or continues to be a big concern. It has a lot to do with the GDPR, and if you look at this slide, you basically see why. In each and every legal framework, in each and every segment or industry, you see GDPR being number one. And of course, especially when you start to use technology providers, cloud service providers, then those cloud service providers are going to process your data and personal data. And of course, there are a lot of questions about that, whether that's compliant, whether that matches to the GDPR. So GDPR and privacy regulation is in each and every industry is a very important part. And that's also why Microsoft needs to step up and be transparent and open about how we process data, under what conditions. That ownership of data remains with customers and not with Microsoft. That Microsoft is limited to what they can do with data. They can't do advertising with enterprise customer data, for example. We only can use that data to provide the service that our customers contract with us. So privacy is a very important part, and you see it listed here as well. And that's also why we provide so much assurance. So this is the assurance Microsoft provides that, again, customers and clients can use for their own assurance. Assurance on ISO statements, many framework mappings that we did. So we asked KPMG, for example, to do a mapping between Microsoft's commitments and the BO, Baseline Informatiebeveiliging Overheid, and NEN 7510. A lot of audits have been performed on Microsoft, for instance, by the Dutch Ministry of Justice, on how we indeed operate on privacy. a lot of guidance that we provide to, for instance, the financial services industry, where we do actual mappings against guidance from the EBA, the European Banking Authority, against Microsoft commitments. And those guidance, we see banks also use them for their own assessments and again for their own compliances. So you see it nicely coming together. Microsoft needs to do a lot to provide compliance assurance, but all that assurance can be reused by customers for their own assurance.
Okay, so there's a benefit there as well.
And again, a great partner opportunity to also help customers, Microsoft customers and our partners' customers with their own compliance estate in there.
So Martin, a lot of information. If people want to learn more, where can they find some information?
There is a lot, obviously. We listed here a few of the main. We also always share URLs, but some of the main URLs that provide a lot of context. I actually would like to start with the compliance guide, which is the link at the bottom link, because what we did is we basically wrote a document. It contains over 60 of the most asked questions to Microsoft about compliance and security and privacy, with answers, obviously. So you can use it as some sort of a guide towards basically almost all the other information that we have available as an organization on compliance, security and privacy. So I would certainly download that guide and have a look. And then you see some of the other important entrances there. For example, the Microsoft on the issues. It's a blog where we often discuss challenges in compliance, legal, privacy topics across the world, by the way, not only Dutch specific, but also EU and US. So that's also an interesting blog to follow where we provide perspectives on what's happening in this field. Of course, there's a lot of compliance documentation, also specific to our compliance stack and our compliance technologies. We're going to talk later about. And if you really want to see Microsoft's compliance, Microsoft assurance, so SOC statements, ISO certifications, well, there are over 90 certifications and frameworks that Microsoft has certified against or has been audited against and provides audit reports. You can find them on the Service Trust portal. The link is also provided there. And then, of course, when it comes to privacy, there are still a lot of questions. There are still a lot of questions about our contract, our data processing agreement, which is also directly linked there. So I think this summarizes much of the material that we share directly with our customers, and where I think that customers can also build some knowledge around to basically also discuss that with their clients when talking about the whole compliance.
Because actually a lot of the questions that are being asked to us for compliancy are actually addressed in the contractual commitments.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, Martin, thank you very much for this introduction and insight. And coming up next is we're going to look a little bit more into what Microsoft is offering and how you can have actually a conversation with your customers. What kind of conversation, what questions can you expect, and what audience do you have to address?
As you now know, we've done a lot of homework on how to handle compliance, governance, and risk. And we've also got a toolbox within Microsoft 365 where we've developed a highly scalable way for your customers and clients to protect and govern their sensitive data. But the question is, where do you start when talking about information protection and governance? And what's a meaningful conversation to have? Well, my name's Rodney, and I'm accompanied by Anela. We're technical specialists here, and we're going to talk to you about sort of the pillars we think about when having a meaningful conversation and how you can leverage this toolbox when you want to build a practice on helping your customers protect and govern sensitive data. But first of all, data protection should be very much top of your mind, right? So the volumes and types of data are growing. There's lots of tools from lots of vendors that take a huge amount of work to seamlessly integrate in a given organization. And work is happening anywhere, at home, in the office, in hotels, abroad. And there's growing complexity of security breaches, and with that, of course, a growing risk of non-compliance. But before I jump into it, so just think in your head what kind of priority does this have amongst the organizations and the customers that you work with now and you're going to work with in the future? What do you think? Do you think it's a priority? Do you think it's 90% of people that care about this, 30% of people? Well, to answer that question, we've looked into it, right? And the thing that we've seen is that from our customers, we see that one of their number one priorities and their concerns is to comply with regulations. And it's about protecting and governing sensitive data. They fear the possibility of accidental or unapproved data sharing. We've seen 63% of respondents talk about this particular issue when we surveyed it. And additionally, organizations don't have the confidence that they can detect and prevent the loss of sensitive data. So when approaching the customers and clients you want to work with, as our partner, I think the key pillars that you need to think about are know your data. So what data do I have? Where does the data reside? Protect your data. How do I protect it, encrypt it? What data is at risk? Prevent data loss, preventing the oversharing of too much data or the inappropriate sharing. And then, of course, the governance. How do you develop a long-term strategy on how you're going to keep, retain, and delete data? Of course, you've got to get started somewhere. So there's 2 steps in a typical information protection and governance journey. And the first thing we think about is getting started by building a foundation of our core tools. And then we're going to talk a little bit about that first. And the second thing we're going to talk about is expanding that information and governance capabilities to enable a hybrid workplace, the right kind of questions you can ask your customers so that you can get an idea of how they want to protect their environment. So Anela is going to cover these first 3 pillars: know your data, protect your data, prevent data loss. So that's about identifying and classifying sensitive data, applying protective controls, and preventing sensitive data leaks, and preventing data loss. So that's accidental data loss or inappropriate sharing. And then she's going to hand over to me to talk a little bit about governing data. How do you retain data? How do you delete it in a way that complies with some of the regulations we spoke about at the beginning of the webinar? Over to you, Anela.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome once again. My name is Anela Jaganyat. I'm technology specialist in the field of compliance at Microsoft. And as Rodney said, today I will talk about the first 3 pillars we see here on the screen. But before I go into the technology, I would like to take a moment to briefly reflect on why is this a topic that our customers should care about. What we see here on this slide, these are a few examples from mainly Dutch newspapers. And what we usually can read are articles related to data leaks of sensitive personal data, and that is being reported to the regulator. So those are the first 2 examples you see. Something else we see more frequently, those are the ransomware attacks. So hackers, they steal the data, and in return for them to give it back to you, they demand a payment in cryptocurrency usually. A third example I put here on the slide has to do with intellectual property theft, usually an insider job. So here is the famous Tesla case where former employees, before they left the company, made copies of important schemas, designs, codes, and then they left and went to the competitor. Anyway, it's not a pleasant situation. So what we usually see when such an event occurs, our customers, they are trying to fix it as soon as possible. They do everything they can to recover from it. But at the same moment, they are more or less forced to deploy a long-term strategy at the same point, because everyone will be asking, hey, how are you going to make sure this will not happen again? So anyways, if you're not yet having these conversations with your customers, please make sure to do so. Make them aware of the risks which are out there, but also make them aware of the possibilities, how to work on that on time. So the solutions which are out there. So as Microsoft, we believe in a unified approach. We believe that your data should be protected regardless where it lives. So our Microsoft Information Protection and Data Governance solution is built to protect your data across all environments. And that is what we see here. So your data is protected on-prem, in the Microsoft apps, on Windows, of course, but also other platforms like Mac, iOS, Android. It's protected on SharePoint sites, in Teams, Microsoft Groups, Exchange Online, and SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business. And on top of that, our customers, they can use Microsoft Cloud App Security to extend the same protection to non-Microsoft apps and non-Microsoft Cloud. So to have unified protection across all platforms. And the unified approach is also reflected in the fact that we have one single portal, which is compliance.microsoft.com, where customers can access and manage all of their Microsoft compliance solutions. So if we move further into the pillars now, and I'll start with the first one, Know Your Data, which is all about getting to know your data. So it is about exploring your data landscape. And for this, we provide our customers with very clever technologies. There are many technologies available to do so, but I want to call out a few which are very commonly used. So the idea here is that the technology will automatically scan the data landscape of our customers, searching for sensitive info. So the built-in sensitive info types are a good example of that. These will automatically scan the environment, and they will be searching for things like social security number, a passport number, a Visa card number, and similar things. Something else our customers use frequently, those are trainable classifiers. They are built on machine learning. They're actually my favorite ones. So here again, we have readily available templates to detect things like profanity, harassment, or resumes. But our customers, they can also create their own trainable classifiers to detect sensitive data which is very unique to their environment. So think of specific reports or projects, things like that. Again, there are many more technologies available like fingerprinting or exact data match. All of that meant to help our customers to get to know their data, so to automatically detect the sensitive data in their environment. And next to that, we have a Content Explorer and an Activity Explorer, which will give a helicopter view on the data to our customers. So the Content Explorer will show where the sensitive data lives. So is it on SharePoint? Is it in specific clouds? Is it in the email? While the Activity Explorer will show how that data is being used. So how is it being edited, deleted, shared, etc. In short, this pillar is all about getting to know the data, understanding what kind of sensitive data do I have, where does it live, and how is it being used. So once you know what kind of data you have, you're ready to move to the next step, which is to protect your data. Because when you know the type of sensitive data you have, you can define the level of protection which is appropriate for that type of data. So here, the sensitivity labels, they play an important role. So on the top part, you see a very frequently used set of sensitivity labels. So non-business being used for everything, all data in your environment, nothing to do with your business, so the hobby projects of your employees. Public being used for all business data meant for public consumption. General, all business data not meant for public consumption. Then we have confidential. This is actually where we can connect the previous pillar to this one. In the previous pillar, we found all sensitive data automatically, and here we say whatever contains sensitive data, we will label that confidential. And the highly confidential label is normally being used for the very business critical data. So everything, if by accident overshared or gets in the wrong hand, it could potentially cause big harm to the organization. So basically how it works, the sensitive info is automatically detected. That is connected to the sensitivity labels, and the sensitivity labels, they are connected to a level of protection. So now, to apply the sensitivity labels, we provide our customers with flexibility to adjust for various scenarios. So there is automated labeling, manual labeling, and recommended labeling. Auto labeling would be like, we scan automatically the data at rest. We find specific data, and if that data found, then automatically apply a specific label. Manual labeling is the opposite of that. It is for the data which is being created at the moment. So I'm creating a document, and I will decide which label suits the document. And the third option is something in between. So I'm creating a document, and the system will recognize, hey, that is a resume, or hey, that is a social security number, and it will provide me a tip saying, according to your organizational policy, you should label this confidential. And then in terms of protection, also here we provide our customers with the flexibility. And the protection varies from visual markings like a watermark, a header, a footer, policy tip, but also to encryption or limiting access to specific data. Both things are as flexible as possible to provide our customers, with that flexibility to adjust the right level between productivity and protection. And I have an example of how that looks like. So here we see a Word document from Contoso. And top right, you can see that the label is highly confidential. We see a watermark and a header, so you can't miss it, right? This is highly confidential for Contoso. And on the bottom part, we can also see that this file is encrypted. So this brings us already to the third pillar, which is the last piece of what I will talk about today before I hand it over to Rodney again. Data loss prevention, which is all about preventing of oversharing of your sensitive data outside the organization. So things to consider here are deployment, employees, and events. So from a deployment perspective, we offer our customers the flexibility to decide themselves how to enforce DLP. So which actions they want to allow or disallow per app on different devices, services, etc. So think of blocking a chat message in Teams. Consider not allowing external communication per email, or disabling upload of files to a browser, or disabling printing and similar actions. So our customers can decide themselves what kind of DLP fits the type of data they have and the type of culture they have. And something similar applies to the employees. Employees are an important part in here, because it's not only technology, it's also a little bit about the organizational culture. DLP could potentially impact the end user. So therefore, again, we provide our customers with the flexibility to apply the DLP policies at different levels. So it could be as mild as just monitoring the DLP violation, but allowing the end user to share anyways. But you monitor so you will know what happens. A little bit stricter level would be still to monitor the violation, and you will allow the end user to share the data, but you will require a business justification before they do so. And the most strict level would be, again, always to monitor the violation, and then it would be to block the action. So the end user will not have the possibility to share the data outside the organization. And lastly, what I wanted to mention, the events, and of course, it is important to have access to a portal, again, the compliance portal, where we offer the possibility to triage and remediate events and alerts in case things happen. Also here I have an example of how that looks like. So here we see an end user who wants to upload a PDF file to a browser, and you see a pop-up screen appears saying, hey, this is sensitive content. You are about to upload that to an unprotected site. Are you sure you want to do that? Just as an example. And as said, this was already the third pillar, and I'll give it back to Rodney.
Thanks,
Here you go.
So you heard about these first three pillars. And then, of course, there's this long-term, how do you govern this data once you've found out where it is, you've applied the right protections onto it, and you prevent inappropriate sharing. Governance, an important topic in many of our customers today, something that will resonate with many of the people you work with today, and perhaps some of the future customers and clients you work with. It's about making sure you manage the information lifecycle and records intelligently. So we see the first part here, it's about enforcement of sensitive data retention. We spoke about classifying data based on the risks that you find, but then also automated policies using file properties like Excel, Word, and other kinds, and pattern recognition, as Anela also alluded to make sure that you can make sure that data is used for its purpose and not longer than that. And then, of course, when you want to delete data or archive data, you want to make sure that's compliant as well. You don't want to delete the wrong records. You don't want to mess with data integrity issues in databases. So we also focus on retaining and then deleting data based on in-place management, where users collaborate to prevent sort of productivity loss and reduce risk. So you want somebody to be able to, let's say, work on a BSN number or a credit card number if they're in the finance department, and have a financial sort of retention period, let's say 7 years or something like that, applied automatically without the person in their day-to-day job having to think, am I managing this correctly? You want this to happen within the course of their day. And then, of course, meeting privacy and regulatory requirements. You have data protection authorities or supervisory authorities that don't just want to know that you do these things. You want to be able to demonstrate that you're actually complying with these regulations, and you're deleting data when it needs to and retaining it according to the purposes you promised you would. So we have processes for using label analytics and insights and defensible disposal that can give rich audit trail, so you can explain this to the regulatory authorities that you're responsible for talking to, that your customers are responsible for talking to when they implement these solutions. So now we're talking about the capability set here, but now what's the conversation you're going to have with customers when you implement this rich set of toolboxes, right? So this is about expanding their information protection and governance journey. Once we have the foundation covered, there's, of course, this reality that we have to deal with, right? Remember when work happened in the office, right? We could securely access the apps we needed to do our work. Data access was controlled and safe behind a firewall. And then we used managed devices to access the apps and data. And the mode of access was flexible. We could choose web or client access. Well, that's changed, right? There's been a lot of remote work happening in the last 2 years or so. We suddenly shifted to this, and we needed more apps to collaborate and keep our businesses working. This shift created more data in more places, and in addition, we were using managed devices when available, but we also relied on unmanaged devices to stay connected to the workplace. And we couldn't rely on a corporate firewall to keep our data safe. We had more modes of access to corporate data. So now we find ourselves in this hybrid work setting where good information protection and governance should be flexible to meet a customer's needs, and data should be protected across all apps, data, and devices, and modes of access. So a clear customer question that you can ask to your customers is, what are their plans for hybrid working? How do they plan to tackle this? And the point is being flexible, seeing where they are, so you can meet them where they're at with this toolbox. An example in enabling hybrid work situations with context and content. Let's look at this example. Sort of an organization has guidelines about how to handle a document that contains sensitive data. At home, on a personal device, the employee has limited access. They can view the information but not edit or share it. At the office, on a managed device, they have full access to the document. And then when traveling and using a public kiosk, they don't have access to the information. This is a kind of setup you can discuss with some of your customers on how to implement this toolbox in real life. And then, of course, your customers don't just work with Microsoft. So it's also about expanding compliance beyond Microsoft, right? A vibrant ecosystem that provides data protection. So in our toolbox, we also have common cloud platforms using our 41 plus data connectors. And these connectors help customers archive data in Microsoft 365 so we can manage it using all our compliance solutions. We have robust APIs to allow you as a partner or development teams to create custom integrations. And then there are, of course, built-in customizations that you can leverage out of the box if you don't want to build from scratch yourself. We've already got over hundreds of partners building solutions. As an example, you can retain information using information governance or find information using advanced e-discovery. You can meet supervision requirements for this data using communication compliance. And then we've got partnerships with other vendors like Telemessage and Veritas to allow you to archive data from the most commonly used messaging platforms like SMS. Integration with Adobe PDF, so you can also extend data protection towards PDF-related documents. So now we've spoken about the tooling at your disposal, the conversations that you can have with your customers to really figure out what their needs are and then adapt the tooling to that. Then it's worth just repeating the breadth of this, right? So there's this compounding dark data challenge with sprawl of data across various locations. We've spoken about our North Star of information protection governance solution to provide you with a rich set of capabilities to know, protect, prevent loss, and govern your data wherever it lives, whether it's on-premise or in multiple cloud locations, whether it's your productivity data, like office files, PDFs, and any emails, or it's your analytical and operational data in relational databases. And importantly, you can help customers protect and govern outcomes for all of this data in a consistent way across these sets of locations. So this is the differentiated approach that we have, an ecosystem, right, designed to work as one solution. You work with customers on this toolbox, you're going to be working on the basis of one solution. It's going to be familiar, consistent, and unified. We've spoken about intelligence and automation that's built into the platform that you can leverage to automate a lot of the processes that in the past were very difficult to automate, so a lot of manual work was done. That takes a lot of the load off you when you deploy the toolbox, and it makes the customer conversation more lively when you're working with them. And then a lot of pre-built stuff, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but you can test things out and see what you want to customize for your customers and clients. And then the data lifecycle is important, right? It needs to start from inception all the way to the end of the lifecycle. And this whole process can be managed via this Microsoft 365 toolbox. Quick look at what the environment looks like. You can see Anela spoke about the Know Your Data. This is the administrator dashboard. Let's say you'd be the one operating it. You can see the Overview tab at a glance, where the most common sensitive information types and labels are used in your organization, how they're being used in the organization you're working with. You can see a Content Explorer tab, which provides a richer understanding of data at risk by displaying the amount and types of sensitive data in a document, and an integrated viewer that displays full content in documents or emails for those with appropriate permissions. And then the Activity Explorer tab that provides a better understanding of activities to relate to your sensitive data. And it helps you investigate events that could be leading towards data leak scenarios. So this is a look into the toolbox. What's the next step for you to actually leverage this, go to your customers with this and have a conversation? From our perspective as technical specialists, the thing that we recommend is get trained. We've got a Microsoft certified security, compliance, and identity fundamentals course that you can use to really get to know this toolbox and what's offered in it. Of course, you get a lot of information. We're going to talk more about building a practice on this later. So you can use this toolbox and you can use that customer conversation, how much you know your customers, to really apply this toolbox in the way that suits them and aligns to your strengths. So thanks, and looking forward to working with you.
So welcome back for part 3, where we're going to look into the partner opportunity and how to build your partner practice. I have with me Olaf, and Olaf is representing the partner development role, and Olaf can tell us a little bit more about what the business opportunity is, because we see an opportunity in the Western European market of 2 billion euros on compliance. So Olaf, how does that look like?
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for the introduction. As my role as partner development manager, I'm helping partners to build a practice, because we see a lot of opportunity here, as Mike already told. And after all the content you get, now we want to talk about what's in it for you as a partner. So when we look to Microsoft security, compliance, and identity, we want to speak about now is about the partner revenue opportunity we have. When you look to back to 2020, and you look to modern work security, we spoke about a partner revenue of $13 per user per month. When we project this to 2021, we already see a huge growth with 85% to $24 a month. And when you even make the step with this, and you also combined the cloud security in it, you see it's even 130% to $30 per user per month. So this is what we want to speak about, because we need you as well as much as our customers need you. When we speak about the amount of revenue you can make, you see, you can also do a deep dive about how much revenue is per solution. So when you look separate to compliance, it's about 20%. When you look to modern work security, it is 40% of the total revenue opportunity for you as a Microsoft partner. Identity is about also 20%, and cloud security also 20% as well. So as you can see, there is a lot of revenue to make when you only speak about compliance. Now, when you do the next deep dive, you can see where the biggest opportunity is at the end, and that's in the managed service. You can see about 42% of the $30 per month per user is about managed services. Because when you speak about compliance and also security, it's not a one-off. It's not you do a project and with the project you are finished. No, you need to keep aware every time again, and you need to help the customer structurally. So when we see the change of the partner landscape in the last years, this is an extra step for you as a partner to build new managed services. Managed services on compliance are not really, we don't have enough partners who have this practice yet. And when you project this to the facts we heard before, every customer should have something in place. Because we speak about regulation, and you cannot ignore regulation. So when you think about this quote, I give you some time to read it. There is security and identity without compliance, but there is no compliance without security and identity. We see a lot of partners now investing in security practices and identity, but not so much in compliance. But when you look to the real opportunity and you start speaking about compliance with customers, then you always touch security and identity. So the discussion now about how much money you want to invest in security, how much in identity, etc., is getting much easier when you have already the customer convinced that he should be compliant. Because it's sometimes a little bit strange we have a discussion about if it's needed or not, because it is needed. And when you have the customer convinced that indeed it's needed, he will surely understand that he needs to invest money, and you cannot do it without security and identity. So,
But Olaf, when you look at a lot of partners, they already have some experience with providing security services. So now they are maybe entering the compliance market. Is that the same approach?
no, definitely
Do they
not.
offer other services? Do they talk
Yeah.
to other audiences and people?
Yeah, okay. You're making a nice bridge to this slide. Because when you speak about compliance and solving issues, you speak about adding value as well. Adding value on a way that our traditional partners more or less never did before. So the amount of people you're speaking with when you speak about compliance is not only IT anymore. It's also not only security department you're speaking with. It's also about legal. It's about user experience, because it's nice to have everything in place, but users should be work on a nice and effective way. Governance, risk and compliance, you need to speak about HR, because they are also very much involved in this. Finance, operations, sales, marketing. So at the end, you speak about everybody in a company. And for most of our partners, that's new. So speaking about building practices, you can also think about a partner-to-partner model. What can I do by myself? What can I learn from other partners? Or how can we combine those expertises together?
So one of the questions that came in on the chat was, okay, do I have to have my own legal knowledge?
Well, that depends on how deep you want to go in this, in building this practice. If you want to do everything, you should have quite some knowledge about legal as well as regulation. But one of the things you see with compliance is you need to understand the industry, because every industry has its own standards and its own regulation. So when you start from scratch, I would not recommend to build a practice for all segments and industries, but start with one or maybe two where you already are known in, and from there you can build it up or work together with other kind of types of businesses.
Yeah, and I think that's in my experience also what I've seen with the introduction of the GDPR, that a lot of IT partners, they didn't have the actual knowledge of legal and advisory. So either the partner did the investment and said, okay, we are either big enough to make that investment ourselves, or they were seeking indeed the cooperation with other partners who are providing those audit and legal services.
Exactly, because you need to understand the technology, you need to understand the regulations, and at the end, you need to combine it in a solution for our customers. So, absolutely true, Mike. Yep. Well, so this is at the end. What are your areas of focus? Will you do everything? Will you do parts of it? And how you're going to fill this in together with other partners? Mike, I guess a lot of people watching this are now very convinced to start really building a practice with it. What would you advise partners to start with?
Well, It's on the one hand, think big but act small, because basically there are some steps that you have to make to build up your practice. And we endorse from Microsoft is get knowledgeable first, because if you don't master the content, you don't master the conversation, you can't have a good advisory conversation with your customers. So really get to know the products. We have a learning platform available, which is providing webinars and all kinds of preparations, both on the technical side and on the sales side. And then also more and more customers are requiring that partners are being certified. So can they attest that they actually have the knowledge? So we see that more in RFPs or other requests from customers coming in. So do get and review your certification, and for the partners who are capable and having bigger practices, get also an advanced specialization, which we already have on information protection and governance, but probably more are coming because they are really emerging. So once you have mastered the knowledge, then it's time to think about, okay, what am I going to bring to market? So you actually have to define your market. As you expressed, and also Martin said, we have different industries and all have their own requirements. So probably start with one which is most important for you, and at least get to know the basic stuff that you have to know about that industry, so you can adapt and have a more candid conversation with your customers. So the next thing, you have to build the narrative. So do I have the right conversations for the right audience, as you just explained? Because we're not talking only to IT, but we're maybe also talking to IT. We're talking with business owners. And then, is there help available? Yeah, we do have help available about how you can build up your practice, and I will give some examples on that later. But we have practice building guides which support you in building your solution. So once you have done that, we see that okay, you want to go to market, but how do you address customer intent? What we see is that workshops and actually showing the product to the customer what it does is really a valuable asset in your sales cycle.
But Mike, are you showing the value of our products, or are you immediately addressing the issues the customer has when you do a workshop?
It can actually be both, because we have situations where we do workshops where we actually can, with temporary licenses, enable services within the customer tenant and actually show them what compliance means, not on fake data, but on their data.
When you see this when this happens on this way, so when they do it on the actual data of the customer, in how many percentage a customer is really getting like, oh my God, I didn't know that it was so bad as I see now?
Yeah, I don't have a hard figure on it, but in most situations there is a kind of surprise or even a shock that they are owning more data than they anticipated. It's in places where they didn't anticipate that they had data, because when you have a more in-depth conversation and you say, okay, but your employee also has a phone, do you consider that that's a data risk as well? And they never thought about it. But as Rodney also described, the hybrid model is facilitating that. So the data is everywhere.
Yeah. So it's also immediately a big awareness of customers, and they, okay.
Yeah. And the good stuff is that with a lot of the services that we have, you can either run them in an enforcement mode, or you can run them in a kind of monitoring or reporting mode. So then you get the information, you can absorb it, and you can act on it, but you don't have to enforce it directly. So it's really a learning cycle that a customer can have. So this is a really powerful tool to do, and if a customer is interested, then you can actually say, okay, let's do the next step, and let's do a pilot in your environment. Normally, they start off with small groups, which represent specific entities in the organization, and there they can have the real insight of, okay, how does it work for us? Is it interfering, for example, with the processes that the end user has? So we tend to make that as low as possible and frictionless as possible. And then in the end, we come to the point, okay, it's in production, it is deployed, and what's next? And there's actually, as you have said, a big opportunity for partners, because managed services is facilitating two things. You are in constant contact with the customer. There's no sales cycle which is happening every year, every 2 years, every 3 years, but you have continuous communication and interaction with the customer. So that's providing new opportunities, because you see actually on the data, okay, this is new data which is coming up. Have you considered this? Okay, we can adjust policies and stuff like that, and make that data secure, so that every employee can work in a safe manner with it, and reduce risk actually for the company. So the usage is very important. There's a huge opportunity there, because not only where customers maybe already bought E5, but primarily have implemented the security side of the house, but didn't do the compliance part, but they already paid for it. So have that discussion and make that opportunity real.
So speaking about value, it's not only the value you can deliver as a partner, but also the value which is already in our products, what they are using much more. So that also brings value to the customer.
Yep.
Especially when they already have the licensing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So when you look at, okay, what steps can you consider? So let me give you an example here. So it's quite a busy slide, but you can actually see, okay, where do you need to start? One of the questions was, what is a typical time frame that you have to run through for getting an E5 license deployed? And basically it depends. And why does it depend? Because the complexity of the organization, the amount of data that they have, the sources that they want to bring under compliance. Do they have 10 PCs? Do they have 10,000? Do they have iPads in their environments? Do they have phones in their environments? Is there data on those devices as well? So it may vary with customer to customer. But it all starts off with doing the assessment. What data do you have, and actually where is it? So as Rodney expressed also, we have tools available for it where we can crawl the data and actually also see, okay, what kind of data is it that you have? And then you come on the point of a little bit, which is a little bit more time consuming, and that is, okay, who's the owner of the data? Because if you ask to IT, I have a marketing document here with personal identifiable information in it. Who's the owner, and how does it need to be protected? Do they decompose the data and delete it after a while or not? Those are all regulatory requirements, and IT cannot answer those questions. So you have to get back and involve the business. So that's basically where the heavy lifting actually happens. And then once you have, because you probably, if you have maybe 70% of the data which is maybe sensitive, you don't have to protect everything. But actually what customers are doing now, they are doing all or nothing. That's really time consuming and a waste also, because let me give an example. You get a resume in an HR department, so you either hire the person or you don't. But you might say, okay, we'll keep them on file. But there are regulations about how long can you keep that on file. But is that actually happening in true life? So but from a regulation standpoint, you actually have to do that. So the tooling can help you actually with that. So you have to know, okay, what data, then you have to classify, and that are the first parts. And after that, you can actually see, okay, can we optimize? So when we have done the assessment, can we improve it? And then you go into a verify stage where you say, okay, we have this process. Are they working as expected? Is new information, is new things coming up? And that's actually also where the maintenance and the managed services come in, where partners can play a role and say, okay, we can help you. Events are coming up. We are responding to the events and are optimizing, for example, the policies.
Okay, Mike, but this is about the project and the whole project at the customer. But when you start as a partner to build this practice, how long should I think about it will take me to get from starting building the knowledge to go to the first customer and have the discussion about their environment?
It really also depends on the customer. Let me give you an example specifically on information protection and governance. So as we have seen in the other item, know your data is the first part. So that's a hard part, but we do provide tooling for that. Then after that, you can make small steps depending on, okay, what is the appetite and the risk appetite of the customer? What is the absorption level of the customer? Then you can say, okay, we're going to start off, because that's probably the biggest impact, do classify the data, and maybe start with data loss prevention.
Yeah, okay, Mike, but I really understand. But this is when you already have the practice built.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe for a lot of partners, it's interesting to know, when I start now, at what moment, how long does it take for me to get all the training, to build, to define my segment, to build a narrative, so I can really go to market? Is it about 2 or 3 months? Does it take a year? What kind of steps I need to make?
I would say reality about 4 to 5 months before you're really up to speed to, okay, you have the knowledge, you have to think about your markets, and you have built your solution. So, but also there, you can start small and say, okay, we're going to start off with my first service being DLP. So that's maybe a good service to start, where you can have a lot of impact with your customers. And as a next one, say, okay, maybe I'm looking into the next compliance service, maybe insider risk, or maybe information protection.
What would be your advice to do? Or is it depending on the strategy of the partner? To start small and do it step by step and learn on the job as well? Or really start to think first about the whole plan and start training, etc.? Or
basically, I would say set quality over quantity. So yeah, make sure you're good at it, because if you fail at the customer, that's something that's not beneficial for the customer, not for the partner, nor for Microsoft.
Yeah, thank you.
So as you can see also, and it came up earlier, you see also here a part of your practice building is considering, okay, advisory, law and legal.
Yeah.
You can't ignore it when you are discussing compliance. It's part of the deal. It's part of what you have to. It's part of what you have to cover. So it says a little bit about the items that you have to get your knowledge about. Okay, what are regulatory requirements? What industries am I playing with? What sensitive labels do play a role in that? We do have a lot of templates available. So, for example, on healthcare and financial services. So they might help you expedite, but you still have to have the discussion. Okay, did we cover everything, and is it compliant in order to address the regulation that you have to adhere to? So, where can you find some information? We have a lot of information available about building your practice. So we have some learning resources available. A basic understanding about the whole platform is nice to have with the SC900 exam. We have a specific certification now on compliance, and we also have an advanced specialization on compliance available. So there are resources over there. We have partner playbooks available, and I would especially say, and for the smaller audiences, we have Business Premium, which is up to 300. There are compliance and security services in there as well, and there is really good material available for the partners delivering those services. But I would also invite bigger partners to take a look at that content, because there's actually guidance. Okay, how do I build my practice? But there are also step-by-step guides and a complete partner kit. Okay, how do I implement MFA? How do I implement DLP? So they can help you getting up to speed and yeah, shorten that time frame as we discussed on those 3 to 4 months. And basically, yeah, leverage the workshops and the marketing material that we have available. Create that customer intent and go out to the customer and show them the value.
Thank you.
So thank you, Olaf. And
thank you, Mike.
So from here, we'll transition, and we'll get back soon to you for Q&A.
Hi, so we're back for Q&A. I guess I can read some of these out and maybe let's see which one of us can answer some of them. Let's see what questions we have over here. I have one from Ari. As far as I know, almost every IT company or client has to comply to ISO 27001 and GDPR. Does Microsoft have a kind of cookbook for us to, from a partner perspective, help the customer with services from MS and others?
All right, I think I can talk a bit about this. I think the most wise thing to do here is to look into your compliance manager, which is one of the solutions which is available from the compliance portal. So what the compliance manager does, it already creates the baseline, which is needed to comply to those regulations, but also to many more regulations. And this would actually be a perfect start of a conversation, because it will immediately show, so this is what you need to comply with, and this is how far you came so far. So which are the next steps? And that would be like a very easy conversation to start talking about discovering sensitive data, how to protect it, how to govern it, etc., etc.
Okay, thanks, Anela. And we have a question. I think there's a few questions that are very similar here. Some about which licenses these tools are included in. Can we see which tool is available in which subscription? Say M365 Business Premium or E3. Well, let's maybe see how many people have some knowledge on this. E3 and E5 licenses typically are related to enterprise customers with large global multinationals often. Already alluded by Mike and Olaf that Business Premium is for up to, how many users?
300.
300 users. So just maybe some context, the big difference is E5 is for extending to these large infrastructure areas that a lot of enterprise customers have. To your question, DLP is integrated in Microsoft 365. That's included in Business Premium, which means you can at least classify the data and protect your information within your Microsoft 365 software area. Extending to sort of large-scale databases, that's more for the enterprise customers. But yes, you do have some of these features in Business Premium. Is there anything else you guys want to?
No, I think what you actually see is when we started off with Business Premium, there were no security and no compliance components in it. But as threats emerging, we respond to that by adding new services. So we added stuff like MFA, and we are constantly adding and evaluating. Okay, what new values are also beneficial specifically for those smaller customers?
Yep. So that's also related to the DLP question. Yes, you have DLP integrated into Microsoft 365 for Business Premium. Let's see another question here. I have another one from Ari. I see that Microsoft checks the data and classifies it. As I have the possibility to determine in which region my data is stored, say like West Europe region, is the processing by Microsoft also done only in that region? Or is data for scanning, classifying purposes also transferred to other regions like the USA? First thing I would mention, as some of the things Martin alluded to in the beginning of his conversation, is that we put a high premium on trust. So one of those things is you, within a particular tenant that you work in for a customer, should be able to toggle your regions based on where you are. So if you want to be in Europe, you want to process data in Europe, you should toggle it for a Western European region. And then that data won't be processed to the USA. That's a functionality we provide. We always want to say and encourage that you validate this when you're in your tenant. Make sure that's the case and that you've configured it correctly. But our journey is about making sure you can do that and you can transfer it in particular regions. We have Azure locations in a number of regions that allow you to sort of segment your data based on the region you're acting in. And for Europe in particular, we announced the EU data boundary by Brad Smith, our president, that allows EU companies to keep their data residing in the EU. So that's an ambition. We're already complying with these kind of regulations, with the minimum standards, but we want to set an extra standard and make sure if people want to have a boundary restricted to EU, for example, they have that. Yeah. Let's see if we have any other questions. I think this alludes maybe to the partner opportunity discussion you were having earlier, Mike and Olaf. How long does a typical partner engagement take to set up E5 compliance, Microsoft information protection and governance? Do we need to have legal or compliance knowledge to build a practice on this?
Yeah, I think I'll address that already a little bit in the session. You can't actually do without a legal and a compliance discussion with the customer. So yeah, you have to have insight. Okay, how do those regulations look like? What is applicable law? So you have to assess for yourself: am I capable or willing to invest in it myself, or do I outsource it or look for a cooperation with another partner? I know that, for example, in a lot of the small and mid firms, they work, for example, with accountancy firms, and a lot of accountancy firms, for example, are offering those kinds of services. So that might be interesting to see, okay, is there an opportunity to work with a partner? And I know in the market that there are several of those partnerships.
Thanks. I think that is all of the questions we have from this session. There is a question on which tools are included in which licenses. I think a good idea is to look in some of the information that we're going to send you after this, because we've got lots of tools included in different licenses. Don't know if we can answer it in a few sentences within this session, but the information we send you afterwards will hopefully guide you in the right direction so that you can have the right license conversation with the right customers of yours.
So Karin, I did provide the document. Were you able to drop that into the chat, or no? Okay, so we'll see if we can drop that into the chat. So we have a document available on that. On the other hand, most of the time when you're going into the internet and look for the services, there's a comparison list there as well for functionality. So it is online available as well.
Oh, I think we actually have another question that came in at 11:27 from Jos. Can you add external data sources such as file server, SQL Server in the data scanning phase? On enterprise-related licenses, yeah, we have something called, within our Microsoft Information Protection package, there is an extender to on-premise, and there's two versions of this, Purview and Azure Information Protection, and ideally the functions are there to scan onto these extra data sources that you mentioned. So yes, you can configure to classify data on those kinds of data sources. Yeah. Labeling of data types is a must to govern the data, I guess. About historical data, do you suggest, I guess, that data classification is put in for historical data? Short answer to this, I spoke about one half of the two things that extend to other data sources than just in your cloud-based one. One of them is called Purview. There we have a unified data governance approach, and part of that is once you enable Purview, you have what's called data lineage, and data lineage is about identifying the history of how long you've kept data. So it is included that it's not just the data that is born from the day you implement the stack, but you should be able to comply with data that also exists in your IT real estate that happened in the past. So it helps you with that historical data too.
And I think also, Rodney, maybe you trigger me with historical data. You talked also about governing data. So if you have a lot of history data and legacy data, that data can still imply a risk. So, and maybe not meeting the regulations that you can, for example, save all this data infinitely. So there's also some attention that you have to give to historical data. That are you still allowed actually to keep it, or do you have to dispose it?
Thanks. And I think those are all the questions we had. Thanks a lot for tuning in, everyone.